All right. Okay. Mr. Blank?
Good morning.
Sorry.
Al. My name is Martin Blank, and I've been affiliated with Columbia University since 1959. I'm currently a special lecturer, is a title they give to people who are at my stage of the career. Uh, I've been involved with research in electric and magnetic effects and biological effects for many years since I started at Columbia. And I've been involved in the politics, I guess, of the science. I've been president of the Bioelectromagnetic Society, as well as the Bioelectrochemical Society, and the head of the division of the electrochemistry, or organic and biological division of the Electrochemical Society. So I'm pretty well steeped in the science of these measurements, and that's what I wish to speak about. I was also involved as the one of the organizers of the Bioinitiative report, which was referred to just earlier. And so my remarks are really pointed at the science, which I think should really be paramount, because that's the solid data on which we are basing a lot of what we say. And this is my statement. Health Canada and other regulatory agencies are making a serious mistake when they do not pay attention to the biological research studies showing non-thermal adverse biological effects. They have been assured by physicists who explain that that only ionizing radiation can knock electrons out of atoms and cause chemical changes. What the physicists say is true, but completely irrelevant in biology. There are many ways in which living cells can and do cause chemical changes. Indeed, the cells in our bodies produce the vital chemical changes under isothermal conditions, that is, when there is no change in temperature. Health Canada should be speaking to biologists who have published thousands of peer-reviewed studies documenting adverse effects due to the non-thermal levels of non-ionizing radiation. Better still, Health Canada should be relying on the testimony from the cells themselves. Living cells tell you when they are threatened by environmental changes. They start to synthesize stress response proteins, and they do so in reaction to changes in pH, toxic metals, alcohol, etc., as well as changes in temperature. Our research at Columbia University has been about the production of stress proteins, and we, as well as many other scientists, have published clear evidence that cells react to EMR as harmful, that is, at far below thermal levels of RF. For years, increased temperature has been considered the critical factor leading to harmful effects. It is now clear that safety standards must be revised to take into account the non-thermal biological responses that occur at much lower EMF intensities. The current Canadian safety standards do not adequately protect the health and welfare of the public, and especially its most vulnerable members, the children. I urge you to revise Safety Code 6 to take into consideration these established biological scientific findings. I'm ready to answer your questions.
Right.
Epigenetic changes have been occurring, and they've been a subject of interest of late. I'm not familiar with special studies in connection with radio frequency or ELF, but my guess is that the same factors that are in the environment that cause the methylation, for example, are operative during normal exposures. I don't know of anything specific with EMF.
You have literature that perhaps the panel hasn't had access to, or any specific literature you're referring to that you can send to us?
Well, I sent in a statement earlier in which I had 3 of our recent papers on that, and they were in, well, on the computer. They could be downloaded very easily. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
But there's a wealth of literature, and I can refer you to the latest edition of the Bioinitiative report. By the way, I should add that the Bioinitiative report was written by the scientists themselves. It's not one of these things where one gets a panel of experts in general, but not in specific experts. The bioinitiative was put together by people who are involved in the research themselves. So those who, when you read criticism of the report, they're usually coming from people who are not expert in the thing they are criticizing. I think in terms of the panel who make the designation on Safety Code 6 about temperature being important, I think it's probably a carryover from their days as children. When I remember as a child, when my mother ever suspected that I was getting a cold, she'd run over with a thermometer. A thermometer seems to be a very, very useful instrument that everybody's familiar with. And psychologically, we know that when you measure the temperature, and if it's up, then the child is not well. I think the Safety Code 6 panel is probably worried about these old kind of, the same kinds of things. Biology doesn't work that way. Temperature, we are an isothermal kind of organism. Our skin temperature may be different. We may have gradients within the body, but basically all cells operate at this body temperature. And the changes that occur, and there are many of them that occur, they are occurring all the time at constant temperature. So to set temperature change as the criterion is really, it makes no sense at all in biology. And I think that one should have something like the changes that stress proteins, which are the actual signals that cells send out. These are the protective elements that they generate to overcome the harmful effect, potentially harmful effects that are caused by things like an increase in temperature or like bad chemicals that are around or exposure to toxins.
The bioinitiative report has got more than 1,000 references, some of which have been discussed by the scientific reviews and some of which hasn't. Could you give us a list of the key references you think that have been overlooked in the past that we should pay more attention to in reviewing Safety Code 6? Dealing with a document with 1,000 references of varying ages is sort of unwieldy for us given our time limits.
I think one of the things that you should look at the bioinitiative report as, these are writings by experts. Now, and it may be self-serving to designate myself as an author as one of these, but these are people who have been working in the area. I think you can deal with the papers in the bioinitiative report as reviews by people who are in the field. Some of them may be advocates. I'm publishing a book coming out in January where the on electromagnetic fields. The first chapter is entitled A Reluctant Activist. I find myself put into the role as an activist, whereas in fact, I'm just being a scientist who's trying to tell the world what we've actually found. Unfortunately, it has political implications, and as a result, people don't like to hear it in many cases. But the fact of the matter is that these fields are harmful. The cells tell us that. You don't have to go around and worry about whether the temperature is increasing or not. It's easy to measure temperature. It's less easy to measure things like stress proteins. Reviews on stress proteins they're around. And in fact, one of the references that I sent to you is a recent review that came out, I think 1 or 2 years ago. It was written by myself and Reba Goodman. The two of us have been the ones who were responsible for pushing stress proteins onto the scene and showing that they're activated by ELF, the very lowest energy form of electromagnetic field, and as well as by RF. And certainly when you get up to the thermal changes, they certainly cause a release in stress proteins. So there's no question that there's a lot of biological information around that says that Safety Code 6 should take into consideration what we have learned from science. Now, granted that there are all kinds of implications of these changes. One must make these changes. One doesn't have to make them overnight. One should be able to cushion industry so that it doesn't get this convulsion when suddenly you say these things are not safe. You should put in ways in which the changes can be made gradually so that they can accommodate to them. I mean, these are changes like that were put in when they changed the lead content in gasoline. I mean, this was not put in overnight. This was put in and industry could accommodate. One of the great strengths of industry is it can mobilize itself when it's got a task to do. This is certainly true during World War II, when you had nations that had very little industrial capacity suddenly were able to gear up and put themselves into a situation where they could generate all these armaments and cannons and airplanes and so on. Industry is capable, and I think industry is being unduly defensive, and they're sticking their heads in the sand, not realizing that there is a problem. You usually get this happening when they suddenly realize that it hits home, when some member of the family suddenly becomes a victim of this kind of effect. The small part of the population that is electrosensitive. There's a paper that was published in Bioelectromagnetics, the Journal of the Bioelectromagnetic Society. It's quite a few years back by, I forget the year, Lightgeb was one of the authors, where they did skin resistance measurements. And they showed that there's a distribution of skin resistance in the population of adults that is roughly a range of 100-fold. In other words, from the least sensitive to the most sensitive. And when you get to the most sensitive, there's a little blip in the curve. It's like it's a bell-shaped curve, and then at one end, there's a little extra blip. Those were the electrosensitive that were already noted in the biological literature that far back. And the thing is, my guess is if they were to do the same study today, they would probably find that there's a bigger blip. I think what's happened is that because of the sensitization of the population due to this exposure, we've been able to generate a lot more sensitivity. Sensitivity has come not only from electromagnetics, it has come from chemicals, various different chemicals. And there are many documented cases of people who have had chemical sensitivity prior to the development of electrosensitivity. The head of the WHO, Gro Brundtland, who is electrosensitive, is one of the people who is well documented as being electrosensitive. Her electrosensitivity came from chemical sensitivity. So it's not only electrical industry and the EMF various devices that we use now that are responsible. We've polluted our atmosphere with all different kinds of chemicals, and the whole thing must be looked at. In other words, it's an entire picture of what we've done to our society that is coming to bear on the biology. Our biology did not evolve to deal with these kinds of things. If you take a look at the EM spectrum, you'll see that the non-ionizing range, there was nothing in there, virtually nothing in there 200 years ago. We had below sunlight, the only thing we had were the Schumann resonances, these little blips that occur because of the lightning storms that we had on the Earth. But the fact of the matter is we've added so much to our environment that we weren't evolved to live with. And we're suffering the consequences now. But the least we can do is protect the population that did not bring about these changes. And so I urge you to look at Safety Code 6 and make the necessary changes to allow this process of accommodation to start. You've got to get a start on all of these changes that are going on and start to control them and to moderate them so that the population can live as we were designed to live.
You have your coordinates, Julie, Russell, at least we'll have your email address.
Yes, I'm in email contact, but physically I'm in different places at different times, but I can be reached within a day or two.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Thank you, Dr.